Mics are on.
I'd like to start the Building and Zoning Development Committee meeting at 6:48 PM on June 14th, 2022. Present are committee members Heeman and Limpert, council members Scarl, Kelly, Glassburn, Gilchrist. The mayor, or excuse me, the law director, finance director, safety director, service director, economic development director, and guests. On the agenda is ordinance 2022-57, which is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with Fieldstone Developers Incorporated and 31351 Industrial Parkway LLC for construction of a warehouse / office complex in the city of North Homestead. Mr. Upton, do you have, can you kind of introduce this to us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Great to see all you members in person. So Fieldstone Developers is also known as Jeff and Jerry Hammerschmidt of High-Tech Pools. High-Tech Pools is a company that's been around for about 70 years and is now in its getting ready to turn over the next number of years ownership to a third-generation owner. The father took over for his father and now is passing the business down to his son. This family has been in North Homestead, like I said, for a number of years. They first developed 77,000 square feet of buildings on the Industrial Parkway. So if you're headed on I-480 and you see the High-Tech Pools sign, the tan and the red buildings, those were all developed by the same company under a different LLC. Fieldstone Developers. Those buildings are 100% occupied. They employ over 100 people, and so Jeff and Jerry bought this land off of the city. This is where the cutout for the bus stop is. If you'll remember that, they bought both of the parcels. They're approximately about 7 acres. I got to know Jeff and Jerry doing some outreach and talking to local businesses, and they had raised the issue of inflation and what it's been doing to driving up the costs of this particular development project. It's inflated the cost well over 25%, and it's getting to the point where, if they're going to be paying a large sum of money on the development side, the only way to offset that to make a financially feasible project is on the operations side, and the way that you're able to do that is through the CRA tax abatement. So after speaking with the mayor, with the developers, they have committed to creating 100 jobs in the city, spending in excess of $6 million just on the real estate. That doesn't include machinery and equipment, leasehold improvements, and all of the stuff needed to accommodate the tenants that they move in. So they are looking to begin construction this fall, take approximately a year, and begin occupying these buildings with industrial tenants. It's worth noting, in North Olmsted, there is literally 0 square feet of industrial space available. So for us to attract industrial tenants, industrial users, the types of people that create living wage jobs, we need this type of building, this stock of building, in our city. So it is with that I'm recommending 100% tax abatement for the first 10 years and then 75% years 11 through 15. Apologies to B, I just passed out a third iteration of the financial cost-benefit analysis that you all have, and mercifully for myself and others, I printed this out on 11 by 17. So with that being said, happy to answer any questions of the chair, any members of the committee, or members of council.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Upton. Does this include years 11 through 15 at 75% within the
Correct.
Valuation here?
Correct. In the cost-benefit analysis, it contemplates years 1 through 10 at the 100% level, and then 11 through 15 at the 75% level, and it's formulated in through an Excel table and summed out for an easy read.
And then what year was this transferred from the city for the bus
This
stop
year,
program?
transferred February 22nd of 2022, I believe.
Okay.
And so, Mr. Chairman, in one of the ways in which I was contemplating the tax abatement and going back and forth with respect to the percentages is the fact that this land has been municipally owned since, I believe, 1999. The law director or the finance director can correct me if I'm wrong. So it has been in an untaxable status for over 2 decades. So the net current property tax, that is $17,252, is all, for all intents and purposes, new revenue to both the city and the schools. So net, by virtue of this being in private hands and not public hands, everyone who collects revenues via the property tax is better off today than they were in February when this property was owned by the city, and the city obviously not paying property taxes.
So just to clarify, so the cost benefit analysis for the school portion that you're showing here, this is what we would owe the school as part of.
So the school has not asked to be made whole in this particular regard, specifically for the fact that that $240,000 number that you look at, that is new revenue, that's all new revenue to the city, for exactly the reason I stated prior.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Ms. Seaman, go ahead.
Thank you so much for letting me. So with regard to the schools, please explain for, the record and for the valuation and the guests, that, once there is a decrease of X number of dollars, the school has the right to interject into that, and that they are remaining to, just accept the proposal.
Correct. So by the Ohio Revised Code, by right, either, I believe it's Chapter 5709, which deals with real property tax exemptions and tax exemptions, generally speaking, a city can enact either a TIF, which is tax increment financing, or tax abatement at 75% for 10 years. At any time that you go over the threshold of 75% or longer than 10 years, it requires the school board to approve of whatever you're proposing to do. In this case, both are true. We're going longer than 10 years, and and we're going over 100, or going over that 75% threshold as well. It requires that we give notice to the schools, and in talking with the superintendent, they are okay with what's being proposed. They were not surprised by this because we had kind of given them a heads up that we were contemplating this.
And
Mr.
then-
Chair, may I continue?
Please go ahead, Ms. Seaman.
Thank you. And also for the benefit of the record, do we currently have any tax abatements on our books right now?
Pardon me?
Do we have other tax abatements on our books right now?
I should know this. We were just on the Turk. I believe we have 2 tax abatements and 1 TIF that are currently on the record, all performing per their agreements, and were approved by the county to continue as such.
Ms.
Finance?
Coffer?
We have the Aloft Hotel,
Okay,
and we have the residential, the Battaglia,
Omni
Italian.
Senior Living.
CRAs,
Battaglia.
and then the Great Northern TIF.
Well, that's a TIF, but so we
Yeah.
get we get to keep that money, yeah. Okay, thank you. And again, to further clarify, the city, since they owned it, paid no taxes on our own property.
Correct.
And that now the revenue will be $17,252.
Correct, and that doesn't contemplate the job creation component. If you look the 4th box down, this is very conservatively modeled at about $2.64 million in new income taxes by way of the people going to work there, collecting a paycheck. All of that's subject to the 2% income tax. That nets out to $52,800 a year. A net benefit of just shy of $800,000 in new property tax new income tax revenue over the 15-year tax abatement period. So the benefit of the income taxes far outweighs the property taxes foregone in the by way of granting the tax payment.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you, Mr.
Ms.
Chair.
Coffer, go ahead.
The other thing that I would want to note, I'm happy to see that the agreement, the law director and the economic development director made sure that there was language in there, that these jobs had to be, their workplace had to be North Homestead, so that if they are working remote or what have you, they don't count into the factor of, that's a new twist with the way the municipal laws changed and how people are working remotely and withholding for that place which they actually are working.
Yeah, and just thank you for bringing that up. Just that's a net 100, right? I mean, that could be split employees or something if they were part remote and part North Homestead. That's just a net value of 100 FTE, right?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
we expect that if they're going to be creating jobs, that as a part of the job creation is that we receive the benefit of an income tax.
Yeah.
If a job is created and they're working remotely, that portion which is paid to another municipality by way of its income tax obligations would not be included in the calculation.
Right.
If we're going to give you the benefit of the CRA agreement, then we expect to at least get the benefit back of the income tax generated. So I drafted it that way so that it would be excluded.
Okay. I may have a follow-up on that, but that's sufficient for the invite. Thank you. For the meeting, I mean. Any other questions from committee? Questions from council? Mr. Glassberg?
Just two quick questions, Mr. Chair and Mr. Director. First being that this is on the new construction. This is not impacting the previous portion of the property that this family had invested in over the years, correct?
This is just on the two subject parcels that are contemplated in the new development, correct?
Thank you. And then this new development for size of scale, I believe in a previous conversation you told me this was on the order of 100,000 square feet.
Correct.
And give us an idea of what that is.
So roughly the size of a Walmart. Most market-style Walmarts are between 100 and 120,000 square feet. You take a look at your normal inline office buildings. If you look at that grocery store, like a Giant Eagle's about 50,000 square feet, so this is twice the size of a Giant Eagle. You're talking wall heights at 28 to 34 feet, free spans at 50 feet, and it's demisable at 20,000 feet. So ideally, they could have one 100,000 foot user or five 20,000 foot users or some combination thereof.
Oh,
And-
I'll take a Walmart's worth of jobs. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Well,
Just one last question. Where are they at with the planning process of this?
so we have a pre-application meeting with the developer scheduled for next week, I believe. They've got CBRE. I just found out they've retained them in terms of leasing, and so they're ready to start taking this thing to market. And I truly believe that they'll more than likely have this building pretty well leased up by the time they complete the development.
Mr. Scarl, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Upton, the two parcels that we're talking about, one is bigger than the other, I would imagine?
Correct.
And is the building going on just the one, and the other one might be used for parking, or is the building going to be part of both?
So the 100,000 feet is broken up in two different buildings, one of which is 45,000, the other is 60,000 feet. The smaller of the two parcels will have the 40,000 foot building, the larger will have the 60,000 foot building.
Will they be adjoining or just completely separate?
It'll be completely separate.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? All right, at this time, I'd like to make a motion to recommend for approval ordinance 2022-57. Ask for a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 2-0, and I'll conclude the Building and Zoning Development Committee meeting at 7:03 PM.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. We'll begin the Public Safety, Health, and Welfare Committee this evening at 7:07 PM. Present are all members of council, our mayor, law director, finance director, HR director, economic development director, safety and service directors, and guests. On the agenda this evening, we'll begin with Resolution 2022-19, which is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the North Olmsted City School District to establish policies and procedures governing the school resource officer program and declaring an emergency. Director Garreau, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you.
All right, so this is legislation 2219. It was introduced some time ago. This is one occasion where the law director got out in front and introduced this legislation a little too quickly. There was the the attached agreement, the MOU with the schools arises pursuant to 3313-951 of the revised code, which directs that the municipality providing the resource officer and the school district will have a memorandum of understanding setting forth certain basic principles of the relationship that will govern the relationship between the city and the schools and the conduct and role that the SRO will play in working with the school district. So we rolled that out back, again, sometime earlier this year. However, there were a number of issues that were not yet quite resolved between the school district and the city that I had thought had been resolved. So what happened next was I had communication with Officer Carbone, who was our school resource officer. I had subsequent communication with superintendent. I had negotiations with the attorney for the school board, who was insightful in offering comments, and we negotiated back and forth. And what you have before you now, you should have before you now, is an amended version of the exhibit that was attached as Exhibit A as the MOU. So there's not really the two issues that we kind of worked on. There were a number of smaller issues that we dealt with, but the two issues were that I felt were important was the role of any officer that we would have involved in any investigation involving the school district. That one took some time because the school resource officer may have a role in investigations, but depending upon the nature of the investigation, he or she may have their own rights if the investigation in some way concerns them. So I wanted to protect our own employees. Right now, the officer's our employee, and it's going to stay that way. So there's everything between collective bargaining agreements and civil service law and all sorts of things like that, which would come up if the officer had some sort of an issue with the school and they wanted to do an investigation. We would want to be in charge of that. That's the way it should be. He's our employee. So we went round and round on that, and we were able to kind of put together some language that I felt was appropriate and protected the city employee. And they felt was appropriate, that ensured that they would have the ability to conduct mandatory investigations. Think of investigations like Title IX and stuff like that. And we arrived at some negotiation, after negotiation, we arrived at some language we thought was appropriate. The other one was about replacing a school resource officer if they felt there was a reason to. The initial request was that we would, almost automatically, for any cause or no cause, and I said we don't have enough officers to be pulling people out of the rotation to just put them in as resource officers. We have a resource officer that serves that role. So we went back and reworked that language to make it, I think, appropriate for and workable for the city and as well for the district. So what you have before you is the comprehensive MOU that's required pursuant to the revised code, that has been worked through by myself, has been provided to the police chief, been provided to the safety director, been provided to Officer Carbone, and I feel it accomplishes the goals of what the statute requires, and at the same time is, I think, reasonable and fair with respect to how we will operate with the school district on a going forward basis. So got to have one of these in place, and I think this is the best version we could get together and work on for the benefit of our students and our teachers and our general population. So that's what I have before you tonight. So I apologize for the delay, but I think in the time that we had, we got something put together that I think is good. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. When it comes to funding for the officers, is that still?
Separate ordinance. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's still in play, but that's pursuant to a separate piece of legislation.
Okay. And then the part-time SRO, is that going to be a member of our?
We currently
Current
don't have, we only
police
have
force?
the one right now. We only have Officer Carbone. We
Right.
don't have a part-time currently. It would be subject to another piece of legislation, subject to these same these same regulations under the MOU, but it would also be subject to additional legislation for compensation.
So is the plan to bring in someone entirely new to fill the part-time role, or will one of our officers be utilized for the other half with the city and half with the schools?
That one is outside my scope, so, I worked on this one. If somebody else may have greater knowledge of what the future is with respect to the SRO.
Anyone?
Madam Chair, if I would.
Chief, go ahead.
So SRO Camp resigned his position in December, and we're currently in talks with a couple other potential part-time candidates that will fill that role beginning next fall. We're at obviously the end of the school year. We're just getting ready to start Safety Town this coming week, and we've got a couple potential prospective candidates that we will introduce. Actually, we've actually introduced one to the schools already. They have to be in mutual agreements with us, go through our background process as well. They will be a former police officer and then be sworn in as a part-time officer, just like Officer Camp was in the MOU, the unions and so forth.
Okay.
So right now we have one with the potential adding a second. Obviously, school safety and everything going on today, the more SROs, the better as far as I'm concerned. So if we can add additional, but right now one, and then with an additional, hopefully another one later. So the way the agreement works is that after grant monies are applied, we split the part-time SROs with the school system itself. So half from the city, half for the schools, and that's a pretty good agreement.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Are there any questions from committee? Any questions from council? Mr. Hopper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what would allow for like a reevaluation of the agreement? Is it strictly a fixed term, or if the schools change their structure or buildings and things like that, would that be something? That
No, I don't, we don't contemplate it's simply the memorandum of understanding. It's setting forth the protocols. It's a flexible document. If they want to come back and we're going to execute it, but if they want to come back and talk about it, negotiate it, the city's always going to be willing to do that if we think it's in our best interest. It's supposed to be that way. It's more of a partnership than it is anything else. So it's not like it expires and then we're going to yank our officer. So that's not going to happen. I anticipate that it just carries on for so long as an SRO is required or needed, and it's frankly probably going to be as we move forward into the future. And it's a breathable document. It can be modified if necessary. Although I think it's of sufficient scope that it should work for the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, and just one other comment. If the committee is so inclined to make a motion to recommend approval with the substitute Exhibit A, would be how the motion would be formatted. As amended with substitute Exhibit A.
Is suspension being asked for this?
We did not originally, but you know what? We don't have an emergency clause on it. We do have an emergency, but I don't know that we requested suspension, but frankly, it's been around long enough. I know the school board was gonna take this up. If they haven't, they might have taken it up the other night. I forget what night they meet, but I think they were gonna do it here in June. So if so inclined, I think suspension would be appropriate.
Okay. All right, then seeing no further questions, I will make a motion to recommend approval of Resolution 2022-19 with these, as amended with substitute Exhibit A, and ask for a second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Kelly. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes with a vote of 2-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda this evening is liquor permit number 4162501. It's Italian Restaurant Group LLC doing business as Romano's Macaroni Grill. This being a transfer ordinance. Police Department did a review and found no issues. Are there any questions from council regarding this or committee? Seeing none, then I would like to make a motion to recommend approval or to not object to liquor permit number 4162501 for Italian Restaurant Group LLC doing business as Romano's Macaroni Grill located at 25001 Country Club Boulevard, and ask for a second.
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Kelly. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes with a vote of 3-0. Our last item on the agenda this evening is Resolution 2022-15. 55, which is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Chagrin Valley Dispatch for the purpose of providing emergency dispatch services for the city of North Homestead and declaring an emergency. This being our second meeting, I know we've had a number of questions asked. We have gone through this process as much as we can, and we have continued to go through it. Right now, I'm going to open up this meeting to our committee members if they have questions or comments. Mr. Kelly.
I have a question. So, there's been a vote at county that has taken away that deadline of, you have to excuse my voice, taken away the deadline of June 30th, and has extended that out to at least January of 2023. And at this point, I'm just wondering what the hurry is to try to get this done before the July break.
Madam Chairwoman?
Mayor.
Yes, thank you. I could also have our police chief speak to this, but to the councilman, once again, county and state kicking the can down the road and leaving the local communities to try and figure out how to handle these situations that they're imposing upon us. The reality is that the county has a document that was passed in 2013 that calls for regional dispatch within Cuyahoga County. My conversation with the county as late as a few days ago, that document is still, that's their roadmap.
Did that answer your question? Are you looking for further clarification?
Yes.
Mayor, is there?
Madam Chair?
Absolutely, thank you, Chief.
So, Madam Chair, members of council, directors, and guests. So I think if I could answer your question, I saw the email and the letter that came from Cuyahoga County late this afternoon. Does defer the drop dead date to January of 2023 at this point. Hurry would be, that was our start date, or our transition date would be sometime after January of '23 anyway, so I think it kind of falls along with the administration's timeline. Does that help answer your question?
Well, I guess my question would be, being that the date from the county has changed, that if there had been a charge to continue in-house, at the most, it would have been, from what I'm hearing, at $357 per month, as far as the cost would be, but I don't even think that charge would apply at this point.
That's correct, not until at the earliest of 2023.
Right.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Detective Fiorito, is that $300 and some dollars, is that per line?
They, Madam, sure. County,
Mr. Fiorito, please use a microphone for our online viewers. Thank you.
Thank you.
so even when the county starts billing individual PSAPs for those fees, they do credit each PSAP for a certain amount. I think the letter that was put out today said that that fee would probably be around $4,000, between $4,000 and $5,000 per PSAP. But there's not a definitive price on exactly what that fee is going to be, but it's in that range because they give us a credit, some kind of credit for some of the positions, and we pay for some of them. The net would be,
But Sergeant, is that, it's a per month cost, not a per unit? So
That-
the 4,000 would cover for the year?
for the year, yes.
Okay, so it's not monthly 4,000?
No, that
Okay.
$4,000 to $5,000 range is per year.
So at 357, yeah, we're looking at close to 4,000. Is Mr. Kelly, did that, okay. Mr. Glassburn?
So I just wanted to follow up on this point. The number that previously was cited was that our exposure on the 911 element of this, whether it's the fees that would be, or other items associated with us not getting county support, was on the order of $25,000 a year. Is that still the case? And if so, when is it the case?
So that 25,000 is the total cost, supposedly it would be to us, less the credit that right now exists for the county picking up the first 1 or 2 positions that we have, which leaves us with a liability of around 4,000 to 5,000 a year. But that also doesn't include, that's a yearly operating fee. When we have to refresh equipment, buy new computers or replace that equipment, that would be on the city to pay for all that equipment and refresh. And that would be in addition, but that would be in every probably 5-year expense. But that 25,000 estimate, that would be if the county were to bill us the whole thing with no credits, it would be in that range.
So I want to be clear on this. Is it 25,000 or is it 5,000 a year?
The letter
Or
they put out,
4,000 a year?
the letter they put out today was a little over 4,000.
Okay, and you would, I'm sorry to
Mr. Chair, or
continue.
Mr. Glassman, just continue.
So my understanding previously was that, looking at this, we had roughly 25,000 in the lost revenues, additional cost, and then we had the replacement costs of that 5-year cycle. And you had said at our previous meeting, I thought, that was an additional 25,000 on an annualized basis over a 5-year period. Is that separate from what we're discussing, or did I misunderstand, or is that correct?
So the replacement cost for equipment, the every 5-year capital investment, would be around 25,000.
Per year?
Every 5 years, depending on when the county decides to upgrade capital and replace equipment.
Okay, thank you.
It was my understanding that the replacements were covered under our contract with the county.
Currently, they are.
Okay?
And currently, the county is planning, it's keep getting delayed. It was supposed to be this year. Right now, the plan is that if we say what we're doing right now, we will get new equipment sometime next year that the county is paying for. So the 5-year capital replacement of that equipment that the city would be liable for would not be for another 6 years.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand this whole thing. So it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that the county will upgrade our equipment as part of our contract. When it comes to replacing the consoles, the county has grant funding that we would just need to apply for to help offset the costs to pay for that because it's on our own. Is that correct?
So, I'll back up. So what we're talking about is the county 911 system. Every PSAP in Cuyahoga County is required to participate in the same county 911 system. Right now, it's Emergency Call Works is the program that they use. Everybody in the county uses Emergency Call Works. For us, for a city, what that encompasses is some switches, computers, a telephone, some computer monitors, keypad type stuff. So when I say in 5 or 6 years when the county is due to upgrade capital equipment for the 911 system, currently, if we're not part of a regional dispatch center, we would be liable for that capital investment of around $25,000, and that would pay for the new computers, monitors, phones, keypads, switches and stuff, just to support the 911 telephone calls.
But the county's not telling us we need to regionalize. I guess this is where I'm getting at with you're talking about the regionalization, and they've put that off. It's my understanding. Now, again, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to understand where these figures are all coming from.
So the county plan is still to regionalize the entire county and to only have 4 PSAPs countywide. That is their current plan right now, and that is state law per 911 funding. What they said today in their letter is that because Cuyahoga County is non-compliant in that right now, it was supposed to be in effect already. There should only be 4 PSAPs in Cuyahoga County right now today. The county is years behind in enforcing that. And what they have said today is that they were planning on billing each non-consolidated PSAP starting in July for their portion of the 911 equipment and services. What they decided today is they're not going to bill individual PSAPs, and they're going to delay that billing until January.
But that's the $357 a month?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this isn't some $100,000 that we're going to lose?
No.
Okay.
No, and even if they were to bill us the entire amount and not give us some kind of credit, I don't know what that number would be, but around 20,000 a year. We're not talking hundreds of thousands, no.
So again, why the big push to get this done immediately? I guess I'm trying to figure out the urgency in expediting this whole concept of picking up our dispatchers and moving to the other side of the county.
So it's not so much an urgency, and it's not really based on that 911 monies or billing. That is a piece of it. The county's desire to have everybody regionalize and the potential of the city liability. I mean, $4,000 a year is not a huge liability for the city to pay for keeping 911 stuff, but there are all of the other components and benefits that the city would get from regionalizing is what we are looking at. And if it were to be approved today, our timeline is still January 1st, because it would take that long to get all of the pieces in place, the equipment, the infrastructure, the setup, the personnel in place to be able to be functional by January.
Okay. Does anyone else have questions? Mr. Glassburn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, one of the documents council members received in the last couple of days was a 5-year projection if North Homestead continues dispatch on its own. So, there's a couple of things that appear to be the big movers of cost points beyond just inflation and salaries of existing employees. But one of those is, that kind of goes from 0 to something, is the contractual services line. And there's a little bit of a description in the assumptions below. But would someone be able to tell us where we get to the 70 to 85,000 on the contractual services that we were at not much in 2020 before, last year 35, this year 62? Is that overtime? What is that number that's popping up? And thank you, sorry to ambiguously ask.
No, well, we kind of all put this together, so.
Sure.
That's fine. The projections are based on the 2022 budget, and there's 62,000 in that budget of contractual services for 2022. And if you look at, and then we just added the 10,780, I believe, that is, I think I noted was the annual fees, which sounds like maybe those are changing, I don't know. But anyway,
Is it the sheet, the newest sheet? I'm trying to figure out which
It's the-
sheet you're using.
well, there's a summary.
I have two.
There's a summary sheet, And then you asked for how the.
No, I did. I wanted numbers.
Right, and here they are, with the assumptions in bold on the bottom.
Okay. Thank you.
And you can tell that it's just 10,000 more. So I don't know exactly what's in this year's budget, I'm sorry, for the contractual services. But I know that as of January 9th, with one payroll to go, we had 49.9% of the entire dispatch budget is already spent. And that's not from the original budget, so it's ahead of the 50% at the end of June. So we're trajectory is to spend all of it.
So, Director, I mean, we were relatively flat in cost for the 4-year period of 17 through 20 in the 700s. But this year, we're jumping up to 970,000. I mean, that's a big jump in a couple of years.
Well, our wages did go up.
Sure.
And I think, I mean, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but we had trouble retaining like part-timers, and so we were trying to hire a couple extra part-timers in preparation for people retiring, was in
Madam
this
Chair?
year's budget.
So with the addition of Fairview Park,
that's right, too.
meant additional staffing, but that was also additional income that was added on that. And part of that was also the increased overtime due to adding Fairview Park as well. And we did add an additional full-time because of Fairview Park, and then we added on another additional full-timer just recently.
So is Fairview Park picking up the cost of their staff and their overtime? Was that put into their contract?
No, we built in the price that we're charging Fairview Park
Okay.
will cover that.
So in our projections, is Fairview Park's numbers, is that included in here, or has that been removed?
That's included in here.
So if we took out North Homestead, or we took out Fairview Park, then what are our numbers?
Well, the revenue is how much is it a year? Chuck? 225
225.
a year? Okay. So I would assume that would take the cost.
So for 2022, the original budget is at 967,000. Take off the 250, does that leave us with 710?
225?
Oh, sorry.
Madam Chair, in other documents we've received, I've tried to always look at this without the Fairview Park component, because if you remember, when we adopted the Fairview Park dispatch, we also adopted the Fairview Park jail. And looking at either of those agreements in isolation skews the cost and revenues. They're a package deal, so to speak. So, I don't know, I think it's a little, I don't know if 225 is the number, I don't know if 190 is maybe more accurate, because there's a surplus in the dispatch and there's a deficit in the prisoner component.
But those numbers are still put in here as costs
In this document, yes.
when
I
they,
can factor those out.
could we get that document prior to next week with updated figures to remove
Yeah.
Fairview Park? Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
Question for the mayor, if I may. Have the mayors gotten together here on the west side to talk about any type of regionalization?
Madam Chairwoman, to the councilman. Yes, Councilman, we meet regularly through the West Shore Council of Governments. So we meet monthly through that organization. And the topic of dispatch has come up in a number of our meetings. We have had discussions, but there's not been any formal contract or any type of formal proposal to consolidate into one area here on the west side.
So in the next couple of weeks, you don't anticipate maybe all the mayors getting together to discuss dispatch on its own?
Madam Chairwoman,
Yes, Mayor.
now, just so you know, we do not belong to Westcom, who also meets separately than the West Shore Council of Governments. And so they obviously have their regular meetings. I'd be happy to be a part of any discussion that has to do with our West Shore sister governments.
Okay, thank
Are there any other questions from committee? Mr. Glassburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, we've been entertaining the question of whether we stay on our own and whether we accept the legislation in front of us of this proposal from CVD. We have received a fair amount of, I guess, estimates from Westcom about our potential participation in that. Mayor, do we have any kind of offer, or do you have any additional communication from the Westlake government on that you can share with us?
Mayor, it's great. Just go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Councilman, I don't have a formal offer. We did go to Westcom, and we did meet with them in order to do our due diligence in making sure that we, had vetted all of our options before coming to council with our recommendation. There were numbers given. Those numbers were provided to City Council. That's what we have. There's not been a formal contract drawn up or presented.
Madam Chair, my understanding is we might have a representative of Westcom attending this evening.
We
Did
do.
you have a process in mind, or did you want to entertain some kind of presentation, or what was your thought process on?
Perhaps just a Q&A at
Okay.
this point would be appropriate.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Are you currently entertaining introducing legislation for Westcom to us? I mean, we keep talking about Westcom, but nobody's saying, here they are, right? Let's take a look.
We're vetting the process. That's why we're asking questions.
Well, but the committee, you can write that anytime. So I'm just curious, are you contemplating that? Is that why we're, pushing Westcom? Because we don't seem to be getting a commitment or a
It's
sound
not-
proposal.
It's not more or less pushing one over the other. It's trying to understand what our
Right.
options are and to do our due diligence in getting all of the information before us so that we can make conscientious decisions on what we're doing with the safety of our officers and our residents.
I understand.
That's what this is about. So that's where we're
But
at.
fairly to Westcom, if we had legislation for them, they would,
But the administration has
Okay.
not put forward that legislation, and I think that it's a little bit too premature on our part to just go ahead and prepare something without working with our administration and doing so.
okay.
I just want
Thank
to
you.
see what Mr. Limpert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to confirm kind of what our selection criteria were for Sugar Grande Valley, or what the components were from, and we've had a few meetings on this, so I think I have this right. I just want to make sure that I'm looking at this from the frame of reference of the administration. So we were looking at them from, sort of a seat at the table, right, or representation as one criteria across different dispatch units that we looked at, including our own. Redundancy of systems, the competency of their ability to dispatch for both police and fire, the cost of equipment, specifically radios, based on our need for upgrade, overall the kind of the multi-year total cost of ownership of doing it ourselves or doing it with each of these potential dispatch groups that you evaluated. And then one of the strong requirements was a unity of police and fire when executing the dispatch, to be like in the same room, from what I understand. So does that frame kind of what you guys felt the criteria were, or is there something I'm missing in sort of your priorities of evaluation?
Madam Chairwoman, to the councilman.
Certainly.
Yes, you've articulated that correctly. Chief, I don't know if there's anything else that you would like to add, but I think that the councilman has summed that up nicely.
Madam Chair, if I would. So when the administration, even the previous administration, and then when Mayor Daley Jones took over, our team of people, we've looked at Chagrin Valley over the last several years. I've had the opportunity to tour Southwest Dispatch in Strongsville, been to Westcom. You know, there's a lot of moving parts that led us to choose Chagrin Valley. Do I love the fact that it's on the east side? I don't. Do I love the fact that Strongsville is on the south side? I don't. My full intention for years would have loved to have had it here in North Olmsted. That would still be, if it was feasible, the best choice. You know, we're looking at buying a product here, and there's like, again, so many moving parts with technology, with buying existing product. We're looking at Westcom. They haven't given us a proposal, and frankly, we'd be spending a lot of money to buy a product that doesn't exist. We don't know if it's going to work. If it does come to existence, I don't believe that they will be able to match what Southwest Dispatch or Chagrin Valley is able to provide. They don't have the redundancy that that either one of those, well, that Chagrin Valley has for sure. The radios won't be on the equivalency. My employees, as well as the administration that's been part of this discussion, feels it's extremely important to dispatch police and fire out of the same room, and I don't think that's part of Westcom's plan. So, you know, again, there's so many things that we look at. What was best for our employees? It's not best for my employees to drive out to the east side. I'm not going to lie to you. But the fact of the matter is, you know, holding it here, it's very difficult for us to compete for hiring employees. You know, these dispatch centers pay a lot more. Again, Chagrin Valley has a great working product. They're #2 dispatch center in the nation. So, you know,
Chief?
there's a lot of things that
Chief, may I interrupt you for a moment?
Sure.
Who rated them as #2 in the country? Is Mr. DeSico here to answer that question?
He is not. I think he's at a dispatch conference. We tried to get him here, and he's not here. No.
I mean, I keep hearing the #2 in the nation, but who rates that?
It's on their website of
It's on their
who-
website, but
But
I'm just, Chief, I mean, no
this isn't a
disrespect.
joke. I mean,
I'm trying to just figure out who's rating them to be #2.
I can get you that answer
That would
because
be
I
great.
did talk to Nick DeSico about this, and I wanted to confirm that that was true. And he did confirm, and he named off the group or rating people. I don't know who that is, but I can for sure get you that information.
Thank you, Chief.
Madam Chair, thank you. I'm just going to add proximity and then employees as sort of criteria then that
That's-
I heard to answer my question, so thank you.
And Madam Chairwoman.
Certainly, Mayor.
To follow up too with what the councilman was asking and what the chief provided, something ultimately that really made us decide to bring this contract to council to consider was the fact that CVD was the only entity that offered all of our current dispatchers positions. I understand that some of them will ultimately decide not to follow to CVD if council authorizes this contract. But that was what was important to us, to the chiefs, that those positions were being offered so that our dispatchers had the opportunity to continue on with their career there if they chose to do so.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Kelly.
Madam Chair, if there's a representative of Westcom
I agree.
here, would like to hear from them, please.
Either. How about over here?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of council, mayor, and other guests. I am from Westcom. I'm the supervisor. My name is Ron Barlow. We did submit budgetary numbers, capital costs to all of the mayors included in this project, which are with North Homestead, Westlake, Bay Village, Fairview Park, Rocky River, and North Ridgeville. I believe everybody in council does have the numbers. If they don't, I can certainly provide them. I know they went out to the mayor and both of the chiefs. Our proposal does include all of the current North Homestead dispatchers participating and being offered work with us. Our current dispatch center is located at St. John's. We have that space, and we have been able to accommodate and build that out to 10 positions, which will house police, fire, and EMS in the same room.
Mr. Barlow, what about your redundancies?
I'm sorry, I did not hear you.
The redundancy,
Okay, so our redundancies, all of our, everything that we have through the hospital, that comes into the hospital, all of our networks are through the city of Westlake. So we have 2 physical servers for all of our IT network in our IT room. One's the physical that's up and running at all times. The second one sits as a backup. We also have a VMware, which is a virtual environment. We have a standing backup that is located at Westlake City Hall. And then we have a additional one that is just been put in service at the Westlake Service Department.
Madam Chair.
So, what happens if there's a loss of power?
So the hospital gives us the space, the room, electricity, HVAC. We pay $1 a year for that space. They have a primary generator that is located at the hospital, and then they have a secondary generator that backs that one up. All of our critical equipment has UPSs, which is power supplies, which will hold the power up on our equipment until the generator kicks on. Hospital performs a generator test every Wednesday at 6 a.m., and all of our critical equipment maintains and stays up during that conversion.
Madam Chair. So, part of the thing we're hearing is that in order for leads and all, there would have to be a secure environment.
Correct.
And we're being told you don't have that.
Well, the hospital has an armed security staff that's on site. We have 2 different ways that you have to do to get into the hospital. There's a main card that you have to do to get into the hospital itself, and then a secondary one that you have to use to get into our room. So, we're secure.
Madam Chair, I think that it's the network that has to be standalone and secure to
Yes, our
provide lead
network-
certification, not someone standing and protecting the room.
Correct.
So the network can't be, is it attached to is it a standalone network?
Correct. It's managed.
It's not attached to the hospital
No,
or
ma'am.
the city of Westlake?
Our network is managed currently by the city of Westlake. The city of Westlake provides all of our, so Westcom is funded through Council of Governments through our
I understand
5
that.
participants. City of Westlake took on the hiring authority for Westcom. So their IT network, it's all done through them. None of it is through the hospital. It is all through the city of Westlake.
I think that that's not gonna be lead certified, but I'm sure that,
well, this is,
Others can
did you
speak
have
to it.
further questions? I think they are going to be LEED certified, no?
We are working on what's called LEEDS compliance. At this time, the city of Westlake has indicated that they want to potentially move their police dispatch over with Westcom. So all of our dispatchers are going through training as well as going through the fingerprinting and certification process so that they can be compliant so that leads can be in the room. And then at that point, they will start going through actual lead certification through the city.
How long does that take?
That can take, the class itself can take a couple of months trying to get through with people with shift.
But it'll be done prior to December?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Anything further?
Sure.
I've been waiting.
I wanted to give it to committee first, please, Mr. Glassburn.
I apologize to my colleague, Ms. Heeman, for jumping the line here, but and Mr. Barlow, thank you for coming to this meeting.
Thank you.
It's good to see you in person. You said the word proposal for this, and you said that Westlake was possibly bringing its police department. How would we go about connecting the dots from cost estimates to doing this if this is possible? Because a normal proposal would be a contract like we have before us, that we say yes, we vote on, sign, et cetera. We don't have something like that. What is, I don't mean to be playing semantics here, but how is this a proposal? Is it, are we saying if we do this, yes to $784 per year in years 2 through 5 and 908? What would we, tell me more about that.
So the proposal that was put out is, I was given the directive by the mayors to provide what it would look like to take the current Westcom cities plus North Homestead to provide police, fire, and EMS for all cities. What the space that would require, the capital cost it would require, and what the annual cost to each city would look like. So that is what I've provided, so that at the next COG meeting, that we can talk with the mayors and discuss what the numbers look like and if it's something that they want to move forward with.
Has the city of Westlake taken any action to define their own timeline for making their own decision with their own police department as to whether they would migrate to Westcom or not?
The mayor had told us to go move forward to do it. We've been in contact with one of their police captains and have started building out the IT network to support it. We've started putting all of our dispatchers through the proper training so that we can allow it to happen. As far as a timeline, it's a matter of getting all of those boxes checked so that we can move forward with it. But they have indicated that that is something that they want to do, that they want to move forward with.
So is that an indication in terms of the mayor issued a directive, there's a council action? What is the, trying to figure out what we'd be saying yes to and how we'd say yes.
Again, the mayor has said that that's what he wants to happen. He's indicated that to the chief and to the captain. And I've been moving forward with making sure that all that's taken care of so that it can occur.
Could you speak a little bit about, you said you used the West Shore communities in this estimate, and you have North Ridgeville as well. What did you use as the basis for estimating? What did you use as your underlying assumptions for these communities? Did you?
All of the chiefs provided CAD call numbers. I wanted to do an apples to apples comparison, so my understanding is that's how CVD does their billing. So we took the calls that were done in 2021, we took the cost formula, put it together, and that's the numbers that came out.
Would this be something that North Olmsted would be unilaterally saying yes to, or is it conditional upon all of the cities or some of the cities participating?
The proposal that I'm taking to the mayors that I've already provided is conditional with all participating.
So if any one of them decided not to participate, the whole thing is off, or how does that flow?
I would have to rework the numbers and redo the proposal.
Okay. I'll yield for a moment. Thanks,
Do
Madam
you,
Chair.
Mr. Barlow, with Westcom, do they charge per CAD call?
No, currently the way our formula is it's based on, everybody pays a 10% equal share, and then the remaining 90% is based on census. But the mayor indicated they wanted to see based on billable calls so that it was a fair comparison between what was being offered from CVD and what was being offered by us.
Mr. Fiorito, do you know if CVD, they charge per CAD call?
Madam Chair, yes. CVD and Strongsville both charge per CAD call.
What does CVD charge? Do you know?
I don't know what that, I don't know what it is per call. So both of them, though, take all of their calls for all of their cities.
We're just talking about CBD because Southwest is out of the
Okay,
picture.
so for CVD, they would take all of their calls for an entire year and divide that out by whatever their operating costs are for that year, and that's how they come up with what their fee is.
So is that number subject to go up, or once we're locked in a contract, then that's what our per call?
It's a
Rate
number
is.
that, it's a number that certainly could fluctuate depending on the volume of calls that we have and the volume of calls that all the other member cities have.
Okay. And did we state what the number of calls were for last year, for North Homestead? Did we ever get, I don't know if anyone had asked that question.
I have it somewhere,
It's okay.
it's around 30,000 or so.
But that's in addition to our cost, our buy-in cost with them?
Yes, the billing per call is the yearly cost of service.
But-
And then there is that capital cost, the one-time capital cost that is payable over 5 years.
But that's in addition to the buy-in? Or is that included in the service number?
Those are,
I have a comparison sheet here that,
It's included in, it's not in the buy-in, that's the capital cost, it's the service.
well, so the buy-in is what we pay up front yearly?
That's the capital cost over 5 years, yes. And then the service is, the operational costs
And then where's the per CAD call come in?
in those numbers.
So it's already figured in those numbers?
It's projected, I believe. is
yes.
what they brought
So
us.
I think the number you're looking at, the buy-in cost was 468,000 or so.
I was only given, what I have in front of me is just the 5-year comparison. It didn't have the totals.
It didn't have the, okay, so
So-
90, the sheet here is $93,000 a year, which for
Right.
over 5 years is about $468,000
Right.
over 5 years, right? Payable equally over 5 years.
Right.
That is the capital cost to buy into Chagrin Valley. And then there's an operating cost for every year, and that cost is around $822,000 a year. That $822,000 a year is the cost for the roughly 30,000 CAD calls for the year, projected that. So they based that on our historical calls and then compared it to their historical calls for all their agencies.
Madam Chair?
Is that number likely to increase?
Uh,
If we were to go over the number of calls?
Can I-
Is that number likely to increase if we exceed the 30,000 calls?
So, yes, if we exceeded those calls, that number would likely go up, although it's added into all of the CAD calls for all of the member cities. So they take their total CAD calls for all, however many cities they have, and divide it by their total cost. So if every city over there dispatched by Chagrin Valley, if they're all their call volumes increased and ours increased, our percentage would not increase,
Right.
right?
And additionally, Madam Chair, the cost of their whole operation that they're allocating based on CAD calls, if they add more cities and they don't have to necessarily buy all new equipment for every single one, that then there's a cost of from volume of having more cities involved in it, that it could potentially even lower the cost per CAD call, depending on that. So I mean, it's a math equation.
But you're doing more with less? So if they're manning 5 or 6 cities out of that facility, they may only have 3 dispatchers on duty. And then those 3 dispatchers would be taking calls for all 6 of those cities, right? Is that how I'm trying to understand how it works, that's why I'm asking,
So those are different questions.
Right,
So-
but I'm trying to figure out then, if you're adding more cities, but you don't have more people, where all these figures are coming from? Like, how does it?
Potentially not more people.
Right.
Madam Chair, so as example, so what Chagrin Valley proposed to us is if North Olmsted were to go there, they would have a minimum of 2 dispatchers dedicated to North Olmsted still, which is very similar how we operate now, in addition to however many dispatchers they have on staff for their other cities. All their dispatchers in that room can dispatch from their desks for any of the cities involved. So if there are 2 North Olmsted dedicated dispatchers assigned at Chagrin Valley to handle North Olmsted police and fire calls, and there's a large event, a large fire or something, and all of a sudden we need 3 or 4 dispatchers to handle the North Olmsted incident, they will reassign those dispatchers who may not be busy with their cities to help out for a time, and then go back to what they were doing.
But that's what our dispatchers do now. But what I want to ask you too is when you say that there's 2 designated dispatchers, that's only for a few months, because I think it was made clear per the information that we received that we would only have our dispatchers working for North Olmsted Dispatch for 6 to 8 months through their training period, and then they would go on to dispatch for whoever they get assigned to that day. And then we'd get whoever we get assigned to that day. That's the information that came forward from, was sent to us between this last week and today.
So initially, any of our dispatchers that go over there for the first 6 to 8 months or whatever that time frame is, they would dispatch for North Olmsted Police and Fire because they know the cities. While that is happening, though, the other dispatchers in that center would also be cross-training to dispatch for North Olmsted, and eventually, the North Olmsted dispatchers that do go there would be cross-trained to dispatch for all of the cities in that center. So
Okay.
everybody in the center can dispatch for any of the cities.
See, when I ask a question though, I get a half-truth until I keep digging, and then that's why I keep coming back, because you're telling us that we're gonna have 2 designated North Olmsted dispatchers at CVD, but when I explained to you that we've gotten the information, you're backtracking now saying, okay, then other people are gonna be dispatching. So I think that the whole thing that's been very frustrating and the cause for multiple meetings is trying to get to the bottom of how this is all going to work out. And we're getting different figures and different explanations, and if we don't ask enough questions, we're only getting to the surface, which is why I keep asking questions, because I want to make sure that each of us is informed at the end of the day and we can make a conscientious decision and know that this is the right thing to do for us and the residents and all of our officers. So again, I mean, no disrespect in asking these questions. Please just know that. I'm just trying to understand it and gain as much information as I can. But it's just, I just want to make sure that everything's correct. And if there's more detail that needs to come, please just say it out loud, because it would be better that way.
So I think the more detail you're looking for is there will always be a minimum of 2 dispatchers dispatching for North Olmsted Police and Fire. After the first 6 or 8 months, it may not be and likely will not be
Right.
one of our current employees, because they will probably be rotated and cross-trained to some of the other cities. But there will always be dedicated police and fire dispatchers for North Olmsted only. It just may not be physically the people who are doing it today. Now, certainly, in a year, our dispatchers, they can be cross-trained for all the other cities, and then they could be assigned to the North Olmsted desk. Or it could be one of the other dispatchers that are assigned to a North Olmsted desk, but there will always be 2 dispatchers, a minimum of 2 dispatchers assigned
Per day?
per shift, 24/7, yes, to dispatch for the city of North Olmsted.
Do each of the other cities have their own designated person?
Yes, based on call volume for each city, that's how they assign how many dispatchers are needed for each city. And I don't know what that breakdown is for all of their cities. I do know that for us, and the contract we got from Chagrin Valley, it would be a minimum of 2. But then everybody in that room, all dispatchers in that room have the ability to help out and/or dispatch for a larger event.
So the minimum of 2 could be the 2 shifts for the day, like 1 on mornings and 1 at night? There would be
No.
2 per shift.
2 24 hours a day, 7 days a
Okay.
week.
Okay. Any questions? Ms. Heeman, did you? I'm
I
sorry.
did. No, they're just quick. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have just a couple questions. So you're heavily tied to the hospital, and hospitals gain funding, lose funding, build new wings, move down the street. How does that affect your ability to continue in their facility in the future? I obviously don't know your contract with them. I know that your rental fee is minimal, and that's a great fit because, the dispatch, and I think didn't it start out as EMS and then grew sort of from there. But what happens if you have to move? Where do you go? What backup plan do you have or thought do you have about that?
Well, we've met with the hospital leadership, and they've actually approached the COG and stated at COG that they are 100% committed to providing the space as far as it goes. That room is available. They've provided us an adjoining conference room so that if we needed to further build out the current space in Westcom and relocate our lunchroom and locker area and that into the adjoining conference room, that would happen.
So you have a written agreement with them for that?
We do. We have a written
Okay.
agreement.
One other, Madam Chair?
go ahead.
Yeah, so you're also heavily funded and operated right now by the city of Westlake. How does that affect operations of other cities? I know you've sort of thrown these numbers out, not in a real contract-type statement to us. And I'm assuming the other cities are sort of in that same limbo stage with you at the moment. They don't have a contract in front of them. So how do you sort of extrapolate yourself from being under the reign of the city of Westlake for your equipment, your IT? Like, what's the plan for
So-
building your own that other dispatch centers have?
Right, so that's the conversation that we would have with the mayors and council governments is everything from the formula of how, who's going to employ. Right now, it's all city of Westlake.
Right?
So it's a formation agreement between the council of governments of West Shore plus North Ridgeville. Do we fund it through that? Those are conversations that we have to have with the mayors to figure out what's the best practice for us to go forward with that.
Okay, one more, and thank you, Madam Chair. So essentially, you're in the process of building a business to host multiple suburbs, and you can't guarantee to us in 6 months you're going to hit the ground running with us and we're all full in going. You
Well-
might still be tied to Westlake, or by then you'll have your own IT people, if you don't really know who's going to be in charge of hiring and employing at this moment.
Right, so we have been for 17 years an established regional
Westlake.
dispatch center for Westcom, correct? And it is funded through all the different cities. It just ended up being Westlake that took over as the hiring authority. So that's how it's been for 17 years. How it looks if we go forward with this is a conversation we need to have with the mayors and with the COG.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Barlow, you're funded by the city, so you're a nonprofit organization?
Correct. Everything that is billed
And-
out, invoiced, so each city gets an invoice based strictly on what was spent for that quarter.
Thank you. And Mr. Fiorito, CVD is a for-profit company? They are not a nonprofit.
They're our council of governments.
Their council.
They're not a for-profit business. You're required, Leeds requirement to be a PSAP center, you have to be a governmental agency or a council of governments.
We were told by another agency through the county that CCOMS is the only PSAP right now in Cuyahoga County. Is
So,
that true?
no.
Wireless, you mean? Wireless.
That's correct, wireless.
Oh,
PSAP.
sorry. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Limpert,
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with these estimates, and North Ridgeville is currently part of the Westcom um, with this kind of push for county regional dispatch groups, is there a similar requirement? I mean, it's a statewide requirement. Is there a concern that Ridgeville would move over to Lorraine County dispatching and then we would have to absorb that portion? Or would that, because they're leaving, that would reduce the cost based on the reduced call volume?
Well, North Ridgeville Fire Department has been part of us for
Right.
about 15 and a half years now. Their police chief originally reached out to us about what it would take to take over their police dispatch, so he has actually visited the center, and his interest is moving his police dispatch to us.
Okay. So the benefit there, that would allow Madam Chair, that would basically allow North Ridgeville to be on the same networks for both
Correct.
police and fire.
Correct, and they have just, within the last couple of weeks, moved to the Marks radio system, which is what all of the local West Shore PDs are currently on. Now, they do have their own talk group, but it does make it a lot easier for them to interact with the local agencies.
Okay. All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
So there was a lot of talk about dispatchers assigned to certain areas, and that interaction about the other one. What about your place?
The North Homestead dispatchers and any of the other dispatchers that would be agreeable to join us would be assigned to the channels that they're on currently. And similar to what would happen at CVD, there would obviously be some cross-training because, you have folks that go on vacation, folks that are off. But what I can tell you is that your dispatchers that work with the Westlake dispatchers, that work with the Westcon dispatchers, there's a much higher familiarity with the area here versus a Cleveland Heights or South Euclid or Shaker Heights dispatcher. There's a much higher familiarity. I mean, most of us folks are from this side of town, are very familiar. We work together every day, doing mutual aids, calling back and forth, so we're familiar enough that we know each other's voice on the radio.
Other question, please? So currently, the hiring is through Westlake.
Correct, sir.
Is Westcom a collectively bargained union?
We are not, sir.
Mr. Glassburn?
I don't know if Ms. Heeman was ahead of me, but,
You go.
okay.
Sorry.
So, another element of all of this is, I know I made calls, our mayor's indicated she made calls when she started looking at this to other communities to see if, in the West Shore, if they were interested, and, this is back February, January, and we got no response out of our elected colleagues at that time. Since North Olmsted has gone public with this and had this proposal from the administration, this process has accelerated. But I'll confess, I have a lingering concern that this isn't, for lack of a better way to say it, real, in that we couldn't get other communities interested in this before, but now there's some discussion of it, and does that disappear or does that ever come into formation? And so that's really where I am concerned that this, how we get from estimates to something that this council could vote on and sign. So one of the other elements of this has been, we have all of these folks who are here tonight. Many of them were here a couple weeks ago. I think most of their first preferences would be to stay the way that things are. But I'm sure most of them, if not all of them, would like for us to make a decision. And so I'm really looking for timeline. I'm really looking for specifics on how we get to that so that we know our decision is stay as we are or CVD, or we have 3 options, or so on and so forth. So I guess my next couple of questions are just trying to reconcile. There were cost savings as part of the CVD proposal, but there was also enhancements to the services that we have now in terms of connectivity with other communities. There's not quite an apples to apples in terms of what equipment or what services or what levels of redundancy. So how, if North Homestead values that connectivity with the rest of the county police departments, it doesn't appear that that's in the proposal now, is it?
I'm not sure I understand the
The
question.
Avtech system, my understanding, doesn't, it would kind of keep us within our own little area, so to speak. And I'm looking to anybody who can more speak on this, maybe Sergeant Fiorito. As we're looking at my understanding is if we went with not the Avtech, with a higher system, we would have a greater level of connectivity with the core connectivity. If that's important to us, is that something that is an element that could change in this proposal?
So the Avtech that we have built out has the ability to have all of your local and all of your mutual aid. Our current consoles that are 17 years old have North Ridgeville, Lakewood, those are all Avon and Avon Lake. They can all be built into the Avtech so that your Olmsted Falls and Township, Berea, North Ridgeville, Avon Lake can all be built into that system.
Madam Chair, I can expound on that for you if you like. So we are looking at two different radio systems, an Avtech radio system and a Motorola 7500 radio system. They're both made by Motorola. The difference is the Avtech radio system, it is not, it will never be a core connection to the Marks radio system. So the Marks radio system is the statewide radio system that we all use. So a core connection to the Marks system is a fixed connection, either by fiber, by microwave, or by internet. It has to have dual and redundancy connections, which means that there has to be two redundant connections. So if you have a fiber connection and a second fiber connection, they have to take completely separate physical paths to connect to the computers, right? And with that core connection, that gives you the ability to access everything on the Marks system. It's all computer programming. So with a core connection on the Marks system, there are probably in excess of 150 or so talk groups. And you can think of a talk group as a radio frequency or a radio channel, but they're called talk groups. So with a core connection, you would have access to every single talk group that's on the Marks system. So in North Olmsted, for police, we use 3 talk groups. The fire department, they primarily use 2, and then they have some fire ground stations. So every agency has a certain number of talk groups that are dedicated to their agency. With a core connection, on a click of a button on the Motorola 7500 system, you can access any of those talk groups on the Marks radio system anywhere. The Avtech system, that is not capable of doing a core connection for 2 reasons. One, Motorola will not sell you the module to connect it to the Marks system because they want you to buy the more expensive $7,500 radios. The bigger piece of that is Marks, the statewide radio system, will not allow any other radio system to have a core connection with the exception of the Motorola 7500s. So everybody in the state of Ohio, every dispatch center that has a core connection is using a Motorola 7500 radio system. And the reason Marks will not allow any other radio system to connect is because these are huge computer systems. And when Marks does updates, and they do updates almost monthly, they want to only configure and do updates for one system. It's too costly and time-consuming to do an update for a 7500 and an Avtech and a Kenwood or whatever. So Marks limits that ability for one radio system only.
Mr. Sergeant, are these the radios that we get from the county? Is this part of our county contract?
This has nothing to do with the
Okay,
county.
I'm just trying to make sure. Okay. Did you have a question?
Excuse me, thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Did,
Madam Chair?
we invested in those for dispatch, is that right?
Those, so the Marks radios that we have in North Homestead purchased and
Yeah,
bought
that's what I thought.
exclusively
They're not from-
ourselves.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions?
I just, Madam Chair, just to clarify, so like what percentage of Northeast Ohio are using Avtech versus the higher end Motorola? Like, are we gonna be one of the few, or is it a pretty broad use group that still uses the lower grade radio that doesn't do the direct connect?
Madam Chair, so the only department I know that has an Avtech system right now is the City of Westlake Police Department.
Okay.
Chagrin Valley and CVD, or Strongsville Dispatch, they both have Motorola 7500 systems.
All right, thank you.
I don't think it's a fair question to ask if he's not doing statewide
Yeah,
research.
that's fine. No, that's fine. I just want to know
So,
in the
yeah.
general, in the area, so thank you, yep.
Mr. Scarlett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Barlow, you made mention that North Ridgeville Police Chief reached out to you about possibly moving
Yeah, he
over to your
called,
desk.
yes.
My question is, did any other police chiefs from the West Shore, have they reached out to you about moving their police dispatch
Not at this
there?
time,
Not at this time,
other than Westlake, yes.
other than Westlake and North Ridgeville?
Yep.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think we need to revisit Leeds quickly here. So Leeds, in order to be a Leeds certified agency, you have to get approval from Leeds and you have to be assigned an ORI.
Right.
Westcom currently does not have an ORI. An ORI is an originating agency identifier.
Can we let Westcom, though, speak for themselves and ask Mr. Barlow where he is with that?
Well, except for the information he gave wasn't quite accurate.
Okay.
In order to get an
Miss-
ORI,
Excuse me, Mr. Barlow, are you working toward your ORI?
So we were working with the city of Westlake, and it was potential that it was going to be under theirs, but they've said that there's just too many hurdles to go over. So we are going to pursue our own. So yes, to speak, if you'd like to continue, sir, yes.
Madam
There's our
Chair.
answer. There's our answer.
Okay.
Thank you.
And how long does it take?
I would like to hear what he has to say.
Okay.
Can you please finish?
If we can make it quick, because I have two others that we're going to go to.
Thank
Okay.
you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, so to get an ORI, ORIs are issued by first Leeds in Ohio and then by NCIC, which is the FBI. In order to even apply to get an ORI, you have to have a approved legislation from the member cities saying that they have authorized those member cities to establish a PSAP. And until you have that legislation and you have management control agreements signed by all cities with that agency, and you have security agreements signed by all cities, you can't even apply to get an ORI. And then once you get your ORI, then you can apply to Leeds to see if you can get authorization to become a Leeds agency, and that's a whole nother process after that.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay. Any others? All right, thank you, Mr.
I'm sorry, I have one other question.
Go ahead.
And then I'll yield, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Barlow, you've referenced that there's an additional conversation being presented, you're doing something with the COG. When is that, and what are you expecting to achieve in that meeting?
Well, I have to check and see when the date is, because I believe they may have, and maybe Mayor Daley Jones can help me, did they table the meeting for this month?
Madam Chairwoman, yes.
So I have to find out when the next date of the meeting is, or see if I can gather all the mayors, have them look at the numbers that we've presented to them, and have the conversation as if those are acceptable numbers, or if they're not.
So, are you expecting that to occur in June?
I don't believe it's gonna happen in June. Again, I'm going to contact each of the mayors to see about if we can get a Zoom meeting or something put together, but there is no formal COG meeting on the current schedule during this month.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Barlow. I was informed that Mr. Sam Gamitro, the president of the Northern Ohio Firefighters Association, is here. You may. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sam Gamitro. As you mentioned, I appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight. I'll shorten my words here because it's been a long evening already. A lot of things have been discussed. We appreciate you guys taking the time to think about this and look this over. The first 18 years of my life, I lived on Mastic Road in North Homestead. The last 18, I've lived in the city of Cleveland, and 16 of the last 18 years, 16 last years of my life, I've been a full-time firefighter and paramedic here on the west side. I am the president of the Northern Ohio Firefighters. We represent 20 firefighter locals in 6 different counties. Our members have served on a state fire commission and statewide task forces. We've been involved in numerous regionalization projects, fire life safety programs, and pension reform. Also worth noting, we operate a charitable organization that has raised considerable funding, upwards of six figures, for various charities over the years. We understand and place the highest value on safety and public service. At our most recent biennial conference, Northern Ohio Firefighter members passed a resolution calling on mayors to maintain, if necessary, expand the Westcom dispatch service. Now, why is this important here in North Homestead? You've heard, obviously, Ron talked about what Westcom can offer. It's important in North Homestead. It's important to me personally because my parents still live here. My friends still live here, and their parents still live here, and I'm still very much attached to this community. And this is important here in North Homestead because a regional dispatch center here on the west side, serving the residents of Bay Village, Fairview Park, Lakewood, North Homestead, Rocky River, and Westlake, staffed by dispatchers from those cities, is not only the safest option for police officers and firefighters, but most importantly, the safest option for its residents here in North Homestead as well. We have members in NOF that were part of Westcom's original formation, beginning back in 2004-05. And I want to make it clear that there was no central regionalized dispatch on the west side prior to that. These cities I mentioned and some of the early employees of Westcom, a committee of nearly 20, met every 3 weeks or so, hammered out standardized responses, language, SOGs, and there were disagreements along the way, and it went live in 2006. There was no dispatch, and they created this from scratch, and it wasn't easy. And that's why I bring this up, because it took hard work and serious investment by the cities involved. There's no shortcut to organizing these things. And there were great points made about the steps that need to be taken for leads and so on. But it's hard work that's important, because once it's established, my firefighters that I represent, Firefighter Plus, and the families, and my parents, and all the families around here need the best dispatch. And I believe people on the west side who know these cities, who know these parks, who know what streets are in what city and how they connect. I mean, communication is everything. You don't have to look far in the news to see communication between dispatch and the people in the trenches can make the difference, life and death, for the firefighters, for the cops, and for the residents. And I live in Cleveland. It's huge in Cleveland. So please, I promise to keep this short, and I'm already long-winded. Please, slow down this process if you can. We appreciate that there's people here who have public service experience and understand some of these issues. It is not a rush. The county is aware that we're trying to sort this out, and they've given us more time. Let's take advantage of that. Let's listen to this Public Safety Committee and not rush through this, because it is too important to me, to my parents, to my firefighters, to my police officers. So thank you for the opportunity. I'll take any questions if you have them.
Question.
Thank you.
Thank you. So obviously, we would like to just keep our own here. Like, who doesn't want that, right? Everybody likes their own stuff, and I really believe in that firmly, and I fought very hard on some other agreements that have come before council to keep our own things in our own ownership. But knowing this was coming, where was the step up, I suppose, by the west side suburbs to want to work a little harder at making this, be a really viable entity, to be prepared for that? It's, the state didn't do this yesterday, the county didn't do this yesterday. So what has been happening in that time frame that they're not ready today? Just curious.
Well, I can only give you my opinion, that I can't
Yeah,
really
I mean,
speak for
that's
the
all I'm
governments
asking.
on the
I
west
don't,
side.
you obviously don't.
Certainly, but I mean, we do work with the governments here on the west side, and some of you guys have received, I think, or saw what happened last week in Lakewood. The city of Lakewood had a council meeting and discussed this very issue. And they talked a lot about that outsourcing and call centers and how the people not knowing right where it is. And it was, personally, I learned a lot even just from that meeting and watching some of those comments. And there were dispatchers there who'd even worked in multiple systems, including Chagrin Valley, that gave very informative testimony to the city of Lakewood. I encourage you, it's already posted on their website, to take a look at that. And everyone here should as well. But if someone's got a better answer about where the cities have been over the past 5 or 10 years, since 2013, when this got rolling through the county and the state, then I would defer my time for sure.
If I may, sir, we actually invested right here in North Homestead in expanding our dispatch center and buying this upgraded equipment and doing those things in preparedness for this. So sadly, the previous administration didn't pursue those relationships on our behalf, but we were even preparing for that. So why?
Well, it's
why
never
now?
too late. Yeah, I mean, and why, if you've got the equipment, then again, it should be on the west side. We need west side people who know our cities, know our communities.
We'll have
Their
them come
comment was
here.
made, there'd be 2 dispatchers just for North Homestead, and that, what do you call it, if there was some kind of big event going on, they could pull other dispatchers in. But that also tells me that if there's a big event in another city, that those North Homestead dispatchers will also be pulled over. I mean, it's all working together, unless they're really separated per city, and I can't imagine they wouldn't help each other out in the same way we do with mutual aid agreements.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. And then the last one, I believe we have Jeff Perry from the OPBA, who wanted to say a few words.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all. Just a little about myself first. I've worked for the Ohio Patrolmen's Benevolent Association for 28 years, with the city of North Olmsted for over 20, representing the dispatchers. I want to give you a slight overview. I work with a lot of dispatchers, a lot of dispatch centers, a lot of regionalized dispatch centers. I represent them all. I've seen the pros and the cons. I've seen people talk how great regionalization is going to be, and then I hear and see the results. It's nothing is going to be nearly as good as having your own people here. It's just not close. I'm saying that not only as someone who, my community is covered by Chagrin Valley, I understand it. I know people who went from dispatch centers that I represented into CVD and left because they couldn't stand working in that environment, not having any real connection with the people that they are serving. I know people who used to be dispatched personally within their city, only to have it switched to Chagrin Valley Dispatch, and they are mad and wish they could only get back what they had. It's just not close. But there's other things I really wanted to talk about. Some of the things I'm hearing, the city just got new equipment. We keep talking about these new equipment expenses. We just got new equipment last year. You're not going to need it for years. The PSAP issue. This law that everyone keeps talking about doesn't have any impact. It's only about cell phone 911 calls. Guess what? There's one center in the county. You're compliant. You're not going to lose any money by staying on your own. There is no push from the county to regionalize. If people do, they're not going to stand in the way. But I know the people for the county, they don't push regionalization. And the new powers that be in the state are no longer pushing regionalization. They're eliminating that push. And the only push really was about cell phone 911 calls. So that's nothing. Back to the employees here. You have a great group of dispatchers. I say that with prejudice because I know a lot of dispatchers. I know a lot of dispatchers are not that good. This is a great group of dispatchers. They've worked the overtime that they didn't want to work to make this city work, to help each other out, to help the officers out, to help the firemen out, to help the residents. They aren't looking for the extra buck on overtime. They're looking to serve. If you send them to CVD, say goodbye now. They're not going. And what does that leave you? That leaves you no dispatchers. No one. You'll have people trying to fill in because they're already shorthanded on dispatchers. I can tell you, statewide, countywide, countrywide, there's a shortage of dispatchers. You've got a good group that's willing to stay here. I wouldn't risk it, because that's a huge risk to you and your residents. I heard it again today, Chagrin Valley Dispatch, #2 in the country. It is on the website. You're right, I got it. I printed it out. I don't know who these people are, but they are quoted in here. And I looked at the article, and it says that Chagrin Valley Dispatch was the winner of the National 911 Leadership Award in 2015. And that the dispatch center is state-of-the-art emergency dispatch agency that serves 12 municipalities within the Chagrin Valley. I think everyone knows that it's 26 now, just at that one center, not the other two. So this is old, old news. As far as the enhancements and connectivity, these groups are all connected through the county now. The county is controlling all of this stuff. They supply the software, so all the software going from one PSAP to the next is all the same. The difference is the dispatchers and the people working it and the IT. There was also some talk about the ORIs. Those are not difficult to get. I know a lot of places that should have lost their lead status for violations, but I don't know of one that has lost it. It's not difficult to get. As far as the radio systems, there are 3 radio systems in the county. Cleveland has one, Parma has one, and then there's the Mark system. They all work 100% with the Harris system that they were talking about, so I don't understand. What I do understand is you've got the great thing going, and the county is doing research right now to see the direction that all PSAPs in the county should be looking for their future. It's due out in October. You can't rush into something like this. You gotta wait and get real, credible information. And that's going through the county, not through different people that want your business and your money. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Yes, that study is the 911 communications assessment of 911 and radio communications and CAD that the county CCOMS is presently working on. And they did tell me that it should be completed by October. But that's going to set standards and everything else, so thank you for bringing that up. Are there any questions from committee members or council? Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Seeing no, are there any other questions or comments from anyone on council? So aside from, yes, go ahead.
Madam Chair, as I stated earlier, we have a full room of folks, many of whom came at our previous meeting of this, have come to our regular council meetings. I would like a clear process so that they don't have to continue coming to meetings wondering about their job status or what we're doing. So I don't have I'm not looking to assign blame. I just want us to pick a direction.
I understand. I do know that we have figures coming to us that I believe Director Copper said we could get by the next meeting,
Just
by Tuesday?
deleting the Fairview expenses out of here.
Yes, to have
right?
updated numbers to show us what it's going to cost for us to keep it in-house. And I know that this whole situation was kind of thrown in to our present mayor's lap, and I appreciate all of the patience that she's had with our committee going through all of this question and answer process. I just have one final question, and I know that it may have been stated before, but we did try to keep this here, and the assessment was that it's best to try to join another agency, I guess, if you will.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, we did. And that's why we looked at all those numbers and provided that to council to show that that part of the assessment was not just going out and looking at other entities, but trying to keep it here, trying to bring in additional cities, not just one city with police, but because as you all know, it's very important for us to dispatch our police and fire together, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That being said, I would like to hold it until we have those numbers, and then we can bring it out, but the plan is to make a decision on this by, as soon as possible, which is going to be soon.
Madam Chair. Thank you. A question. So are we also going to get numbers on potential budget cuts or changes to keep it here?
I
Is
don't know
here,
what
I mean,
numbers
is
we
finance
have.
going to request something like that, or no, we're not considering that at this point?
I'm not considering that at this point. I want to see what
I
the
see.
numbers are
Okay.
from the administration first, because I think the numbers that we have are a little bit inflated
Okay.
with Fairview. Okay, Mr. Glassburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize if I'm repeating myself here, but we need a contract proposal from Westcom if Westcom wants us to join, is my view.
I couldn't agree more.
So, and that proposal has to, by some level of the levels and standards that North Olmsted is seeking, has to conform to that in order for us to consider it as an option. So, we can, do it like they do on sports radio and talk about trading Baker Mayfield, but if there's no other team that wants Baker Mayfield, you have to have the other thing. So, we need that
So
as soon as possible, Madam
So
Chair.
we'll get the numbers from finance I think Mr. Kelly had a question that he had wanted information for, I thought in the beginning of the meeting. If not, we can figure it out. But right now, I want to make a motion to hold this in committee one more time and revisit this when we get the rest of the figures. And ask for a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, motion passes with a vote of 3-0, and our meeting concludes at 8:47 PM. Thank you, everyone.
Good vacation.